Alright, welcome to part 2 of the chamber heater build kit guide video. This is going to go over assembling the actual heater module section like you see here, and then wiring it up. I'm going to try and be a little bit quicker this time, even though I said in the last one I was trying to be concise. It ended up being about 46 minutes long, so I'm going to try and be a little bit quicker for this one. With that in mind, I already have this partly assembled. This will be a little bit further than what it'll be when you take it out of the box, but I'm just going to kind of talk you through those first couple steps, because I think they're pretty easy. You don't necessarily need to see it exactly. I can kind of just show you the finished part here and then explain it. So when you take it out of the box, you'll have your frame with the heat sets already inserted, and then you'll have all your components and hardware. So first thing you'll do is go ahead and put your heating element in. So stick that in. There's a little hole right here. You'll run the wires through there, pull them out the bottom right there. Then put the faceplate over it and put your two shorter screws. There's the long, I think these are what, M3s or M4s, I can't remember exactly. But the 20 mil long ones are going to be for the fans, obviously. The two shorter ones are going to be for the heating element here with the faceplate. So go ahead and put that on, and on the underside of the faceplate, you can kind of see the screws are set deep. The screw is set deeper right there where it's further up on this one. So this faceplate can only go on in one way, and you can kind of see the little notches here on this end. They correspond to those little notches there on the frame of the heating element. So go ahead, put your heating element in, put your faceplate over it, screw that down. Then you're going to stick your fans in. What you want to do is kind of the end here where the air actually blows out of them, kind of like angle this up and stick it in there, and like kind of press and push it into that opening as you lay it flat. Same thing with this one. Then put your 4 screws in. It helps too, before you tighten either of the screws down for the fans completely, get it started, get one started, then get the other one started. Then once they're both in the heat sets and actually started, then go ahead and tighten them both all the way down to tighten the fan down. And you don't need to go crazy with tightening any of this stuff. It's just meant to hold it in place, so it's nothing crazy. Don't get too carried away with tightening stuff down. And then the wires for the fans just kind of fold over the edges here. We'll go over that more in a second. And then the last part here is going to be your thermistor, your actually temp sensor for to tell the temp controller what the actual ambient temp inside the chamber is. So this is going to be from our STC 1000 temp controller. In part 1, I showed you to remove that from the temp controller. I told you to set it aside, that we would need it later. Well, this is where we need it. So go ahead and grab that, unravel it, pull it out long, and then just cut it about halfway, and then go ahead and feed it through that hole there at the top of the frame. And then flipping over to the back side here, you can see all the wires, how it goes. So what I use is just like a UV glue, or like a UV resin really. You don't necessarily have to do this, but it does make it easier putting the frame in and out and just keeping the wires all nice and tucked into their channels. If you don't have something to hold these wires down secure in their channels, you can just use some super glue, or you can just pull them all tight down here and then put a zip tie on it, and then kind of just, once you put the frame in, you just kind of, without the UV glue or something to hold it on there, when you go to put the frame in, it's just going to be a little bit more of a pain to have to try and keep those wires where you want them as you push the frame into the heater or into the printer. So not necessary, but it's just a little thing you can do. I guess I'll show you what I use. So it's this stuff here. I just got it from Amazon. And then I have a little UV flashlight that I use to harden it. But what I'll do is I'll put that thermistor in, and then I'll pull the wire back, and then I'll put a dab of that on there, and then harden it with my UV flashlight. Just helps to keep everything nice and secure. And then as you can see the rest of the way, I just kind of pull all the wires tight, use a couple dabs of that UV glue to keep everything tight. And once I have all the wires down in there, I just pull them all tight, pull them all taut, and then cut them all off even. for the longest wire, or your shortest wire rather, whatever your shortest wire is that's sticking out, I think it's usually the heating element wire, you'll just cut them off even at that length, so you have as much wire as you can, but they're all even. So once you have that part done, the heating frame, or heating module as I like to call it, is then done. We just need to finish up the wiring, and then you're pretty much ready to go. So one other thing you'll have to prepare after you're done that section there is going to be the whip here. So this is the wire whip. This is going to actually be the length of wire that connects from the heater module, and then has the plug on the other end, which will connect to the whip that comes out of the back of the power supply housing that we did in part 1. So basically all this is 6 wires. I'll show you from this end. So you have your 18 gauge pair, so that's 1 red and 1 black 18 gauge wire, and then you have 4 24 gauge wires, 1 black and 1 red 24 gauge, and then 1 additional pair of 24 gauges. The colors don't really matter. One thing also, just to kind of correct from the last one, for the heating element itself, even though I have red and black here for this, it's not actually sensitive for the heating element. You can see both the wires off the heating element here are just black wires. So it doesn't really care which one gets positive and which one gets negative. So again, even though we do have black and red to distinguish for our 18 gauges here, it doesn't really matter which one you attach it to the wires coming off the heating element. The only thing that really matters for positive and negative is going to be for the fans. So the fans are, you have your black and your red here. So if you wired up the PSU housing following my guide in part 1, you're going to just go ahead and use the corresponding red and black colors. Red and black 24 gauge wires go to the corresponding colors for the fans. So we'll get into that a little more in a second. But the whip, so yeah, you have your 6 wires there, you have your 2 18 gauge, and then your 4 24 gauge wires. You're going to pull out whatever length you want. If you bought the kit, the reason I have you do the PSU housing as the part 1, do that before we do this. This way, when you do the PSU housing, you can wire up the whole PSU housing, and then once that side of it is done, whatever wire is left, that's the length you can make this cable. So if you want to make this longer or shorter, or if you have like a specific length that you want to do, however much wire is left over after the PSU housing is done, this way you won't get in a situation where you do this side first, you do this cable too long, and then you go to do your PSU housing and you find that you're short on some wire or something like that. Excuse me. Alright, so so I guess to expand a little further, whatever your shortest cable is left over after doing the PSU housing, you can make this cable that length as long as you have enough of all the other ones to match. But anyway, so what you're going to do is pull off your length, whatever that ends up being, and then bundle them up. Go ahead and tape one side into a little bundle just like this. That's going to help for feeding it through the sheathing in a second. To get your sheathing length, what you're going to do is once you have your bundle all pulled to your length, imagine we don't have this sheathing on here just yet, go ahead and pull it out straight, and then what I do is I just hold the end of the wires right here, kind of lining up with the end of this underside void underneath the frame. Pull all the wires tight, and then when you measure your sheathing, you're going to measure from right here, so the very edge of the frame. So go ahead and hold your sheathing up to there. So imagine there weren't any wires in this second one here. Just hold your sheathing up to the edge of there, and then pull it tight along the length of your wire. And then you just want to make sure that you leave on the other end this side of the wires, leave yourself at least like you know, maybe say 3 inches, 3 to 4 inches. You know, if you're tight on wire, you don't necessarily need that much, but just to make sure, you want to leave yourself a little extra on this end, so you have enough to work with and it's not a pain when you're doing your connectors and stuff on this side. So once you have your nylon sheathing cut to length, you go ahead and use your torch. Just singe those edges just to make sure it doesn't start fraying and falling apart. And then once that is cut and singed, take your taped side of your wire bundle and then stick it in there. And then what you're going to do is kind of with one hand, you're going to like, with this hand, you're going to pinch the sheathing but not too tight, and then just kind of push forward with your right hand to kind of move that bundle forward, and then let go, and then you'll grab it with the left hand, and then you'll smooth the sheathing down, and then you'll just kind of do that, inchworm it all the way to the end, and then once you get it out this end, go ahead and pull your bit of length out of there, and then boom, you're done your wire whip. So then at that point, what you're going to do is get the wires on the underside of the heater frame ready to go. So first thing you're going to do is split the pairs underneath here. So your black thermistor wire is a paired conductor, so just use an X-Acto knife and split it right down the center a little bit until you can grab it and pull it. Grab it and pull it apart, just to get those two conductors separated. And then you're going to do the same thing for the black and red for the fans, for both fans. You get them split. Pull them apart. Do the same thing with this other one. And you don't have to be scientific or anything with how much you split them apart. Just kind of go ahead and grab them and give them a pull. Alright, and then what we're going to do is go ahead and get all of our wires stripped. So again, I'm going to use my automatic strippers. I set it to about 10 millimeters of strip length, and then we'll go ahead and strip all these. Alright, so now I got all those wires stripped. Next we're going to kind of pull these apart so they're not all tangled, just kind of keep them like nice in a way. Alright, then we're going to twist our fan cables together. So grab your two reds from your fan and then line up the insulation and then give them a twist. And then same thing with the blacks. Alright. I hope this camera isn't too far away. I wanted to make sure I could get everything in frame, but now I'm worried that it's a little bit too far. If anyone has any issues, or you can't see, or you need any additional help, just feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to help anyone that needs additional guidance for anything. Alright, so now that we got our two pairs twisted, I'm just going to go ahead and twist these other wires, just not together, just to themselves, just to make sure that the conductors are nice and you know, bundled together. Don't have any flyaways or anything like that. Alright, so now from here, the kit is going to include these quick connectors. So I typically use these. I do like these. I think they're pretty good. They grab really good on the wires. It's not too permanent in that if you ever need to change or do anything, you can pretty easily take these off and then put them back on if required. But if you really want to make it, you know, take it to the next level, if you're going to kind of just put this in your printer, you don't want to have to ever worry about it or ever take it out or ever change anything. You can solder from here, like when we connect our long whip to this section. If you want to solder it, you can solder it. If you want to use something like some butt connectors, like these heat shrink butt connectors, you can use these. Or they have those solder seal ones that have the solder and the heat shrink tubing combined. You just stick it in there, heat it up, and the solder melts and connects it. Whatever you want to use to connect this, you can do that. But this is what's going to be included in the kit, is going to be these quick connectors. So go ahead and grab them. We're going to need 6 of them. I'm going to just go ahead and get them all out. And then what I'm going to do too, so on the sides of these, there's these little keys, and then there's a slot on the other one. So I'm going to go ahead and just line them up and then push it together. So now that's kind of like a single piece right there. They're both connected. So I'm going to, like I said, we need 6 of these. So I'm going to go ahead and just put 3 pairs together so we have all 6 of them ready. Alright, and then we'll open up our little connectors on one side, and then we'll go ahead and start putting them on the wires. So put our red fan wires in, and then when you close these little latches, they're going to snap closed. Be careful, they actually close with some pretty hard force. If you get your fingertip or something in there, it actually can hurt to snap it on your finger. So just be careful. But when you go ahead and push it to close it, it's going to snap forward. And then it's going to still be up a hair. You're just going to push it the rest of the way, and that actually locks it down in place. So let's do our next one. And then our last one. Alright, so now we got all of our quick connectors on. Next thing's going to be to attach our whip. So to do that, what we're going to do is go ahead and strip all the ends of our wires on the whip. And on this one, don't worry about them being too even or anything like that. Just go ahead and strip them, and then we're going to attach them. And then when we pull the slack out this other end, we'll get it all evened out and whatnot, and then we'll cut them even on this end when we do the connector. So on this end, don't worry if they're different lengths or anything like that. At this point, it doesn't matter. Just go ahead and strip them. Alright, so then I like to, again, kind of clean up my bundle here a little bit so things aren't all intertangled and whatnot. So I'm going to first pull my 2 18 gauge wires out, and then we're going to do the heater quick connect first. So again, twist your bundles together. Make sure you don't have any flyaways, and that all of the individual conductors, strands inside of the wire are nice and held together, and then stick them into your quick connector, close them and lock them. So there's those first ones. Next we're going to do the fans. Grab our 2 24 gauge black and reds, twist them. Alright, so there's the fans, and then our last one's going to be the thermistor. Alright, so then the next thing, we're going to kind of get this all nice and tucked in underneath here. So first I'm going to put the heating element one in here. I'm going to kind of tuck the wires down into the void down in there, and then go ahead and stick the quick connect in there. Then we're going to get our fans, and then lastly our thermistor. Just kind of find a way to get everything all tucked in there nice like that. That's usually works pretty good for me with the heater, and then the fan and the thermistor. And I try and make sure I leave some loops on my wire. I'm not like tucking it, shoving it in there to where the wires are being tugged on, or they're real like tight, like radius or something like that. We just try and leave a little bit of slack and everything when you're tucking them down in there. So then once we have that like that, I know it's going to be kind of hard because I have to kind of hold this while I do this, but what we're going to do is take a zip tie, and where the black wires, the heater wires, come through the hole in the bottom, we want to get under those, and then under all the other wires go in pi, and then go ahead and tighten our zip tie down. Just kind of hold your wires, hold your quick connects down, and kind of pull the any excess wire out while you're doing this, and then tighten up your zip tie. So now that's down in there. Cut our tag off. So then the last thing I do here, just to make sure this is nice and tucked away in here, just for shipping and while I'm working on it, so they're not all flapping around, I take some of this just black painter's tape or black masking tape, whatever it is, and I cut off a length. This is about 5 inches long, and then I just go ahead and stick it over the bottom here. And then I go ahead and smooth it down so it's nice and stuck on all that. And kind of rub it down. I know that back wall is pretty skinny, so there's not a lot of surface area there for it to stick to. But I usually go past the edge so I can fold it over on the back side. And then this little piece right here, usually just kind of pinch it and tuck it under. So now we got nice and hidden in there. They're not going to be flopping all over in shipping. It's not going to be flopping all over when you're trying to install it. So now we got all this excess wire here, so that's where we're going to go ahead and take our tape off the other end if you haven't already, and then just go ahead and hold your, let's do it this way so you can kind of see. So go ahead and just hold your sheathing, and then just grab one wire at a time on the other end. Or actually, yeah, it's easier to hold the frame itself rather than the sheathing. So go ahead, grab it one wire at a time, and just pull them all tight. Now we'll kind of see where we're at, kind of form this in right there. So now we got to just pull our sheathing forward because it's too far from the edge here. And it's always easier when you're pushing the sheathing up the wire. You got to kind of grab it from the opposite end that you're pushing away from, and then push from the start. Otherwise, it's like a Chinese finger trap, and it gets pulled tight. All right. picking back up. So we got all this finished up. So once you have a little gap here, you want to leave some room because you're going to take up some of that room with the shrink wrap tubing. But just go ahead and cut your shrink wrap piece like we talked about in part 1. Cut about 1.5 inches, 2 inches, and then stick it on there. When you do it, if you squeeze, you can kind of feel the end of that sheathing, and you want to leave at least about 1/3 of the heat shrink tubing over the edge of the sheathing so that when it shrinks up, it actually grabs on and helps secure that sheathing in place. If you need to push your sheathing forward some more, you can go ahead and do that. Just grab it from the other end and push. Alright, so then we're going to kind of just take the heat shrink right up to the edge. Make sure you have enough going over the edge of your sheathing. And then go ahead and take your torch Alright, so boom, now that side is done. That's what we got. Alright, so then next thing we're going to do is just put our connectors on. So what you want to do too is grab the sheathing and kind of just like hold it with one hand and then pull it lengthwise with the other, just to make sure that sheathing is fully stretched out and extended over the wires. So now there's our maximum length of sheathing we have left. So then we're going to go ahead and cut these wires even so that we can put our connectors on. So I'm going to cut my 18 gauge, my heater, my thicker wires first. I'm going to cut these ones. We'll cut these ones at about 2 inches, maybe a little bit past 2 inches, 2 1/4 or so. And then we're going to cut the 4 24 gauge wires. We're actually going to make these longer because of the length of the connector. If we made them even on the PSU, which if you followed my guide, I usually make them the same length. I cut all the wires off even on the PSU length. So on this one, because the heater connector is longer, we're going to need to leave a little bit more length on the 24 gauge wires so that when we plug it into the back of the heater, we have enough length to reach the connector with the skinnier wires. Whereas when we plug in the heater one, because of that length of the connector, it's going to take up some more room. So if we cut those heater wires at about 2, we'll cut the 24 gauges at about 3. Make sure I get this nice and tight. Sometimes when you're doing this, the sheathing will work its way back up. So you just want to give it a pull and make sure you actually have it fully extended out. So yeah, if we do 2 inches on the heater, we're going to do a little bit past 3 on the other 4 wires. So cut them off nice and straight and even. Alright, next thing we're going to do, before we forget, we're going to go ahead and stick our heat shrink tubing over this now before we forget. So go ahead, cut your heat shrink tubing and then stick it over the wires and then just run it up the sheathing just out of the way for now. We just need to make sure we get this on now so we don't forget later. So after we already put a connector on, we're not going to be able to get that heat shrink tubing back over it. So then we'll go ahead and strip our wires, and again, this is for a terminal, so we're going to do a short strip for this. You don't need too much length. I only do about 4 or 5 millimeters of strip length for the terminals. There's our heater wires. Then we'll do our fan and thermistor. We got all our wires stripped there, so first thing I'm going to do is the heater connector. And one thing you can kind of take into account, like what side of your printer you're going to put your box on. So the heater goes in the printer on this wall right here. If you're going to put your box on the right hand side, you can kind of put these wires on whichever side makes the most sense so that it matches up opposite of the position that they are coming out of the back of your box. This is all kind of just like, you know, neat and tidy stuff. It's not really that important as long as you have enough length to get your connectors actually connected and your wires are in the right spot. That's all that really matters. But if you want to just kind of take that next step to keep things nice and tidy, make sure the connectors line up how you want. So just as an example, if we were doing it on this side here, let me just grab a heater box. So we have our heater box on this side of the printer here. You'll see that the heater connector's on the left and the 4-pin connector's on the right. Well, if we wanted it to be as nice and tidy as we could, we would then put our bigger wires on this side and our skinnier wires on this side, so that when the wire comes in, everything matches up nice and tidy. We don't have to like twist wires or anything like that. It all just lines up how we want it to be. So something you can consider for your own setup. For this one, I'm just going to go ahead and do my connectors and terminals. So first I'm going to do the heater connector. So like I showed in part 1, well, I guess let me go over that real quick. So this is the opposite side of the connector that we're going to be doing on this one, and then it also needs one of these little orange plastic clips, and then you need 2 of your female terminals for this one. So just like on the last one, I always give it a squeeze just to, because it doesn't quite fit into the crimper. They're a little bit too splayed out. Alright, so that's all nice and straightened up. Get it in our crimper. Alright, sorry, I noticed one of my lights died and it was kind of being hard to see, so I wanted to get that taken care of. So alright, anyway, I got the first terminal crimped on there. We're just going to go ahead and do the second one. Same procedure. Alright, so then you just, other than that, the tidiness part I was talking about a second ago, the one thing you do want to do is make sure that your wires are lined up in the right position. It only really matters for the 4-pin that they're correct. As long as the 2 thermistor wires meet the other 2 thermistor wires regardless of color, and as long as the black and red of the fans meet the black and red of the fans coming from the power supply housing, then everything's good. For the heater, it actually doesn't really matter, as long as you only have the one connector that the heater can connect to. So as long as you have your 18 gauges going to the heater connector, the heater's going to be good. But just to kind of keep an easy way of making it opposite of what we did on the PSU side. So if I'm holding it just like this, and this is kind of how I always do it when I do the other side too, I'll have my fatter wires coming out to the right and my skinny wires coming out to the left. And then if I have red first then black, instead of putting it on upright, so clip facing up with the right, or the red to the right, I'm just going to take this connector and flip it over, and then it's going to just be red on the left, black on the right. And again, like I said, this really doesn't even matter. So if you're not OCD about stupid little things, then don't even bother worrying about any of this. Just make sure your fatter wires are going to this connector here. So once we have our pull our little silicone gasket out of there, and I just stick the terminals in, and then I pull back, and that little gasket will come right out of the end there. And then we're going to go ahead and stick our terminals in. Just kind of hold it as close to the edge as you can and push it, and you'll kind of feel it clip into place. So now those terminals are in. Then we're going to pull our silicone gasket back down and just stick it back in there. Alright, and then the last part for this is putting this little orange plastic clip in here. So you're just gonna, there's like this blade on there, you're just gonna stick that blade in there and then push it down until it clicks fully into place. So now that's all nice and tidy and put it together correctly. Alright, and then the last thing is going to be crimping the terminals on for our 4-pin connector, and that's going to be the longer male blade connectors. That'll be in the baggie with the black 4-pin connector. Let's go ahead and get all these crimped up. Alright, so there's our 4. And again, just make sure when you do your connector, if you have your PSU box sitting there next to you, you can look at this side of the connector that we're doing right now and just kind of hold it up next to your box connector, and just make sure all your wires are going to the right place. There's a little indent. This light being dead is really kind of being a pain. So yeah, if you look at the back where you put the terminals in, there's a little indent on one side, and then if you look at the actual terminal itself, there's like a little clip, kind of, it's just like a little piece of metal that's folded up. That's going to be your lock that locks it in. You want to match the side of the terminal that has that clip sticking up. You're going to put that in so that it matches the side of the indent on the side of the plastic housing. So push it in, and sometimes you'll feel these ones click in, sometimes the click isn't very tactile. And sometimes the wire starts to bend, so you kind of can't push it anymore without the wire just flopping around. If that happens, just go ahead and grab a pair of tweezers, and then you can kind of grab the end of the terminal itself and just give it a little push the rest of the way. So like this one here actually doesn't want to quite, oh, there it goes. But if it didn't, you grab your tweezers, grab that end of the terminal, and then just give it a push until it's fully in. So now we got all 4 of these are locked in. So then our last step here, do one more sweep of our sheathing, make sure it's fully tight and extended. Then we're going to pull our shrink wrap tubing up, leave about 1/3 there over the edge of the sheathing, and then try and match these so that they're both facing clip up. Alright, so that's pretty good. Then we'll go ahead and shrink it. Alright, so you're pretty much there. At this point now we're just going to test it, and then you would go ahead and install it in the printer. In terms of installing it, really the only thing to do is drill a hole so you can run your cable through from the inside out. What I usually tell people is if you look in the chamber near the back left hand side, there's a little hole. I think it's a hole or an indent. I don't know if it's just an indent in the casting or if it's an actual hole, but it's like a little indent. If you just go ahead and use that as your spot, that's a good spot. I know if you go in that indent, there's no cables or belts or anything in the way underneath that you're going to hit. But that is something to consider if you're going to drill a hole in your own spot. Just be cautious because there are belts that run along the underside of the printer, and you don't want to hit those when you're drilling or anything. But you'll go ahead and drill that hole out. I use a step bit or a unibit, whatever you want to call it. Go ahead and just hog it out until it's big enough that you can fit your connector through. You can kind of take it and fold it like this. Get the front bigger, bulkier connector through first, and then get the rest. And then you'll go ahead and just feed it around to plug it into your power supply, obviously. And then this piece here, it doesn't actually, there are screw holes here, but you don't have to actually screw this or secure this into the printer in any way. It's got these clips on the back here, and these are kind of just like pressure clips. So when you go ahead and stick this in, there is little there's little pieces molded into the bottom of the chamber that this base will kind of it'll be in front of the edges of this base, and that'll kind of lock the bottom in. It won't be able to go anywhere on the bottom. And then when you so yeah, basically put that bottom in on an angle like this, and then just push the top back, and as you do that, these clips will press down and compress, and then once you press it all the way in, they'll kind of pop back up and lock it into place underneath the aux fan. So last thing here, I'll just kind of show you testing it. Go ahead and plug your AC power in. And then we'll plug our connectors in. The 4-pin sometimes is a little tough to connect. If you're trying it and it's not going in, take a small pair of tweezers and just kind of press, if you have like needle tweezers like these ones, press in the end here just to kind of loosen up these female terminals on the 4-pin. That should make it a lot easier to get this connector together. And then also just be cautious when you put the 4-pin connector in. If you had a terminal that didn't quite fully click into place, when you go to push this connector together, it can actually push one of the terminals out of the connector housing. So just make sure if you have an issue, that's something to check. Make sure that your terminals are all fully seated and that the connector is fully connected. Let's go ahead and plug our fan connector in. So there's all that. So we'll go ahead and turn our switch on here. And then we'll turn, or sometimes the temp controller turns on automatically then. You can leave these on and just use this power on the temp controller. Once you have it all set up how you want it, you can just turn it on and off with that button, or you'll turn it on and off with the Wi-Fi plug if you have that option. Alright, so first thing we're going to check, make sure it looks like it's reading an accurate temperature for the environment you're in. So 21.9 degrees Celsius, that's pretty much what my shop here is always at. So that's a good sign. If it's like EE, or the temperature is rapidly fluctuating up and down, or it's just it won't seem to settle on a single temperature, that usually means that somewhere along the line, the thermistor, there's something that's not making a good connection. If it's EE, that means it's not getting any thermistor reading at all. That could be that you accidentally mixed up your wires in your 4-pin, and you actually have the thermistor wires go into your fan wires. It could be that there was an issue when you did your JST connector that goes into the back of the temp controller. So if you get an EE, you want to start checking the thermistor. So just start right at the back of the thing, make sure this connector is fully plugged in, make sure the terminals are good. Then you'll check this connector here, make sure that your wires, your thermistor wires, are actually matching up in the 4-pin. And usually one of those things is going to be the issue. Alright, so this one looks good so far. We're getting a good reading. So we're going to hit the S. Hit it once, hit it again, and hold it until you get the F1. Then we're going to start... hold on. How did I do this again? Can't remember now. So just hit the S, hit it again and hold it, and then that'll allow you to start hitting the arrow up, and you can set the temperature. I'm just going to set that to about 50 right now so I can start to test this. Then what you're going to look for, make sure your fans are running. I always just kind of gently touch the fan here, make sure that those fans are actually running. So both of those fans are good. And then once, give it another couple seconds or so, put your hand in front of it, you should start to feel heat coming out of it. And yeah, this one is definitely heating up pretty good. Alright, so this one looks good, everything seems good. One last thing, it's going to be in the housing here, right at the end of your terminals on the power supply. There's a little white plastic screw. That's actually going to adjust the voltage. So what I usually do, I turn it until it automatically kicks off. Then I back it off until it stays on. And then from there I'll back it off about a quarter turn. And then that's pretty good. So you're getting a good, you're not going too hard, you're not going to damage anything. Like you heard the power supply kicking off, that is its over voltage protection and whatnot, so it has protections built into it. It's not going to let you do anything bad by adjusting that. So if you just go until those protections kick in, it turns off, then back it off anywhere between a quarter to a half a turn on that screw. If you want to, you can get the multimeter out and you can meter and see what your actual output voltage is, and then you can set based off of that. Or you can even just listen to the sound of the fans and decide what you want to set based off how much fan speed you're getting. It's up to you from there. Alright, so yeah, this is cranking out some heat right now. The fans are running, everything's running good. I usually give like the connectors like a wiggle and stuff too. Just make sure that there's nothing that's like just barely making contact, that everything seems good. And then as soon as I start installing it or messing with it, it's going to start giving you issues. So it's better to find that something went wrong or there's some kind of issue you need to deal with now, rather than waiting until it's fully installed in the printer, and then it's kind of a pain to have to deal with. Alright, so yeah, this one is good to go. Go ahead and turn it all off. Alright, so then at this point, the last thing you would do is go ahead and put your lid on your PSU housing. Take your 4 flat top Phillips head screws that will be in your kit, and then go ahead and screw your lid down, and then you can install it and you're good to go. If you use that Wi-Fi plug like I mentioned, I have it available with a Wi-Fi plug also. In that case, you would just go ahead and plug your AC power from the PSU housing into the Wi-Fi plug, then set the Wi-Fi plug up using your either Apple app or your Google Home app or Alexa or whatever you want to use. I use the TP-Link Casa Wi-Fi plugs. They have their own Casa app. You can use that too. I think you actually have to use that to set it up first. So you use that, set it up, and then once it's set up through the Casa app, you can then add it to your Google Home or Alexa or whatever other like third-party service you want. And the way I typically use that is if I know I'm going to be doing a print that I want to use the chamber heater, I can, tell Google to turn on the X1 heater, and it'll turn it on. It kicks whatever you last had it set to is what it'll turn back on to each time you turn it back on. So I basically just leave mine set permanently to like 52 degrees Celsius on the temp controller. That usually equates to about 58 to 60 degrees Celsius of the actual chamber temp, based off the reading from my X1's internal temp sensor. So that's pretty much where I use it every time I need the chamber heater. The stuff that I use my chamber heaters for, that pretty much does what I need it to do. I typically don't want to go any higher than that just because I don't want to start running into any issues with overheating motors or anything like that. So I'm a little conservative with it in that sense. I know that the heater has enough power to raise the chamber temp higher than that, but that's kind of where I draw the line personally. I just don't want to take any additional chances. But yeah, so I'll tell Google, turn it on. It'll turn it on, start preheating the chamber, so this way by the time I get to my computer and get the print all set up and ready to go and then send it, maybe 5 or 10 minutes has passed at that point, and it's pretty much already fully up to temp, and then it just stays there throughout the full print. And then once it's done, if I have a print that's gonna end in the middle of the night or something like that, I can actually schedule it to turn off. If I wake up in the morning and I know the print's done, I can just real quick tell Google to turn the heater off so it's not running and wasting energy. So yeah, having that Wi-Fi plug is definitely a super nice convenience and feature. Alright, just go ahead and get this stuff cleaned up here, but as far as the build guide and the video, I don't think there's anything that I missed. Yeah, I think that's everything. Alright, well, like I said before, if anyone has any questions or issues, or if somebody thinks I did miss something, please feel free to reach out. I have my contact info in my channel description, I believe, and in the description of this video. I'll have it there. On my website I have stuff. You can contact me through Etsy, wherever. So I'm here if anyone needs any additional help. I appreciate everyone that has bought a kit from me, whether that's a pre-built or a build-it-yourself kit. I appreciate the patience, especially of people that have been waiting for this video, being understanding. I appreciate the patience of people that have, bought a kit or bought a pre-built. I had a lot of family stuff going on over the past couple months that has really made a lot of things difficult. So, it's been especially tough. I've been doing my best to stay on top of everything, so I appreciate everyone that has worked with me and showed me patience and trusted in me, that I wasn't just someone trying to scam them or anything like that. I always feel bad giving people the runaround and everything like that, but a lot of times I truly mean it. I am trying my best, and sometimes things just don't always go the way you expect, or I'm sure as everyone knows, everything always takes 10 times longer than you actually think it's going to when you're planning it out in your head. So all that stuff combined just led to stuff like that. But anyway, I'm not going to drone on any longer in this video. I know I've said I wanted to be quick with this one, and I'm sure I'm now already over a half hour at something at this point. So yeah, thanks again. Take care, everyone.